It started just like a normal life, and I was running away from the dining room window when a light flashed on my back from the window, and I swiftly turned back to see the sky was lit during the night. My father dropped the fork he was holding, spilling a glass of red wine onto his newest work shirt. He didn't even notice it. He was shocked to see it and kept looking at it with his eyes wide open. He told me that he didn't know anything. Both of us stood there and saw a blurry light flickering in the sky. It looked like some type of ship. "Where'd it go?" my dad whispered. All of a sudden, a bright light appeared in the sky and it zigzagged rapidly and went towards the side where the lake was situated. My father called the sheriff, and I could see that they both were scared to talk to each other. Meanwhile, the ominous yellow light appeared again, darker this time, and appeared to have landed near Turner's Ranch at the east corner of town. My father told me to go to my room and sleep, as I had school very next day. He got a call to which he responded, "Yes, sir. Give me about 20 minutes. Then he looked over at me, and for a second, I thought I saw fear on his face. He tucked me in and kissed me on the forehead. And then he left the room, keeping the lights on near my bed. I heard him closing the front door with a click. I was home alone now. I didn't know how I fell asleep, but all I can tell you is that I woke up the next morning with a terrible headache. My father hadn't come home yet. I held my head tightly with my hand and somehow managed to get into the kitchen. I was surprised to see my father waiting for me already at the table. "Good morning, son," he said. I looked over at him with confusion and asked him several questions about the night, but he kept a strange expressionless face and said that I must have had a nightmare. Then he stood up from the table and smiled. It didn't ease my fear, only enhancing it as the smile turned into a grin far wider than it was usual. He advanced towards me with a strange walk and told me that I should take a day off from school today so that we could have a little field trip. I asked him if I could go to my room for some time, as I was not feeling well, and I noticed that all of a sudden, his wide smile faded into an expressionless face and returned again a moment later. I went back to my room and closed the door behind me. I pressed my head into the pillow to try and lower the pain. I tried to recall last night, and I remembered details that I had somehow forgotten. I remembered that I hadn't fallen asleep during the night, as my father had gone to check out the strange sighting with the sheriff. Instead, I sat by the window for the whole time and watched. I couldn't remember everything, but I knew that I saw something. 20 minutes or so after my father had left to meet the sheriff, there was a blinding flash of light that emanated from where we had seen the object land. After that, I couldn't recall anything, but somehow I woke up on my bed. I didn't know what was going on, but I was scared. I trusted my father, but this whole thing just doesn't seem right. My headache grew worse, and I was worried about the person outside the room. I wasn't even sure if he was my father. As I was on my bed, the door creaked slowly open, and I opened my eyes to see him grinning over at me. "It's time." Before I could tell him anything, he advanced toward me, held my arm, and forced me outside the room. We got into his old pickup truck. I held a pillow in my hand to press my head against for the headache. I kept my eyes closed as he drove down the long road. When I opened my eyes for a moment, I saw a bright patch of pine trees from the window. I saw a family of deer as well, their eyes seeming to focus on me as we made our way farther down the road. When we got to the town square, it was unlike anything I had ever seen in my life. My friends and some of my family were there as if they had been waiting for me. Their eyes were happy and bright, and as we drove through the square, I noticed each one of them was grinning widely. I must have fallen asleep then, because the next thing I knew, I was standing in an open field that must have been Turner's Ranch. I noticed that his eyes were all black. He had no whites in his eyes. "You ready?" he asked, grinning widely and stepping aside. On the ground behind him sat a circular silver disc, maybe only a few feet wide. I found it almost unimaginable that such a small object could have been responsible for the blinding light we had seen the previous night. "That's it?" I asked. My father nodded. "Go closer." I didn't want to go closer, as his tone changed slightly to anger. He started advancing toward me in that same creepy demeanor. Suddenly, lots of people dressed in the same weirdly long black dresses started to appear. They all had strange big heads, with similar looking features, and they were not human-like. Their bodies were small, their head were large, and their eyes were like black shining tennis balls. They circled around me, whereas my father came really close to me and said, "Don't be afraid, son. You're going to understand everything very soon." I unwillingly began to walk past my father and toward the small silver object ahead of me. What surprised me even more was that, as I got close to it, it got even bigger. At first, I had noted it to be roughly only a few feet in diameter. Now, as I approached the object, it seemed to go on for miles as it loomed just in front of my gaze. As I got closer, I saw a few bodies lying on the ground. I just stood there, turned around, and saw all those weird and creepy figures looking at me. And when looked back at those bodies lying in front of me, I was shocked to see that one of them was my father, lying next to the sheriff's body. They were dead. Their bodies were strangely pale. I started screaming at that point and started running in the left direction, which was just trees for a mile, and that was a shortcut to my house. I could hear a lot of footsteps behind me along with weird whispers. That didn't sound like a human voice. When I turned for a moment while running, I saw that same alien creature behind me, disguised as my father. But this time it was very different. Its face was all messed up. It had so many wrinkles on its face. Its mouth was extremely wide, and its eyes were abnormally large with shiny black eyes. I turned back and started running even faster towards the sirens that I could hear at a distance. I kept on running until I saw a police patrol, and near that police van, there was a whole FBI force that had sealed the area for unknown reasons. They were guarding our town. I ran straight at them and got fainted. I opened my eyes at a hospital and was under interrogation for a very long period of time. Doctors told me to believe that my father died in an accident, and I couldn't take the loss emotionally. They told me that everything I told them was mere hallucinations. But I know what happened that night, and it was an alien encounter.